Cook Islands. The Paradise Islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, the heaven on our Earth. If I will ask you about the most beautiful places on our Earth, several things will come to your mind. But I can bet one of them will be the beautiful tropical islands with the coral reefs, white sands, tall palms, absolutely transparent waters, coral fishes, and the breaking waves of the ocean. There are so many different islands on our planet. However, do you know how they form? Why they exist in particular places, where we can find them? Let's in this video, an example of Cook Islands, see how this type of islands formed in Pacific in particular, what makes them so unique, why they have this beautiful appearance, and what type of danger they are in. Before we start, I'll just give you a brief introduction into the islands, what type of islands exist on our planet. If you look on our planet Earth, we have many different types of islands. And the islands doesn't have to be just in the ocean. They could be found in a lake or the river or estuaries. So they're not necessarily the piece of land that's separated by the waters in the middle of the ocean. In this video we'll talk about the ocean islands. So I will give you just a brief geological classification of the islands we can find on our planet. And of course you will think about the islands, for example, as a Madagascar, the big island, or Sri Lanka, or Ceylon Island. All these islands are big, large, they look like they used to be part of the continents, or they will be part of the continents, like the New Zealand Islands. And they're quite substantial. In the same time, we have numerous smaller islands. While we're here, let's have a look. There's a famous Maldives Islands. The beautiful, amazing places everybody wishes to visit. And all of these type of islands, they're so different. Some of them spread in a long line, some of them found separately, like a Tasman, for example, and some islands in the very odd places. Let's briefly understand what type of islands exist in Cook Islands, what they are. So we can categorize all the islands, depends on the origin. Origin is where they come from. So everything on our planet, if you watch my video about plate tectonics, will be divided into different plates. We have oceanic plates and we have continental plates. And in that sense, we have the areas, zones of actual continent plate, we have zones of ocean actual plates, and we have zones of convergence, where the plates meet each other, meeting points. For example, famous New Zealand, it's the place of meeting of two plates, although they meet under the ocean originally, and now they express themselves as the two big islands in the forming underwater base of the future continent plate. The continent. We learned from previous video that half of the South Island belong to the Pacific plate and half to the Australian plate. Therefore, you can have the islands related to that. So it depends on the geology. You can find continent type of islands. They can find around the main continents, on the edges. You can find these islands on the boundaries of the plates, where they formed, in the places where the one oceanic plate going under the lighter continental, or two continental plates meet each other. And we find the islands which are pure ocean formations. We looked on the continental bordering islands, or also the Svalbard or Spitsbergen will be one of those, Greenland, Northland, Indonesian archipelagos, or microcontinents such as Madagascar, New Zealand or Sri Lanka. these islands or in the past or in the future or the part of the continent. And usually they find more diverse type of life, animal and plants, and they have very unique ecosystems. Another famous islands could be such as the British Islands in the Mediterranean, or the big islands of Indonesia, Kalimantan. The boundary islands usually of Cainozoic age, and that's the bordering places between oceans and continents. These places are very seismic and there's a lot of volcanoes as well. And these zones, islands that formed there are new formations, that's why they're all so recent, and they're not part of the old continents. And usually they categorize as the older island groups with volcanic tectonical type of the topography, and younger ones, mostly the tops of the small volcanic islands. They're younger and they're formed in Neogene or the Quaternary. But nevertheless, all these islands not that far from the continents they belong to this continental plate where the oceanic is going under. Sometimes these islands even connected with the continents when the sea level drops. For example, in the last million or so years we have periods of global cooling, ice ages. At that time the level of the sea of the ocean dropped dramatically. For example, Zond or Japanese island group. These islands characterized by big diversity and depends on the history, geology of that area and the torrential islands, the connection with the mainland and the history of its formation. For example, one of these type of islands is Cuba. Another famous islands you know about, it's the Philippines, and then this type of islands as well. You can see on this image how the ocean plate is actually coming under the continental, where the geology in this part of the planet is a little bit complex. We have not just a normal continent in the ocean plate boundaries, but we also have ocean and ocean plates boundaries. It's not that straightforward like if we looked in the west part of the Americas. And all these islands, you can imagine, have very unique geographical characteristics, depends where they're located, next to equator or in the colder areas. It will depend the type of life there, vegetation and type of the landscape we can meet there. One of the interesting islands I want to show you, it's the South Georgia Island, and this island is similar, formed on an area of the meeting point of the different plates. And this island, I talked about this when we talk about the whale migration in my video. You can check it out. It was quite significant that time for the whale hunters. And these have glaciated areas. You can still see some glaciers here. So that this island is very affected by the very rough winds around the Antarctica. You can see there's another group of the islands following exactly this boundary of the convergence. But if we go into the Pacific, we look in the east part of the Pacific towards the equator and more north when we met the Hawaii. All these islands have very particular formation. They're purely oceanic islands and they're formed on the axial oceanic plate. But how they form, it's very deep part of the ocean, there's nothing for miles here, and then boom, we have the islands. Famous Hawaii or similar Samoa, French Polynesia, Tuvalu or Cook Islands. We all heard about Bora Bora, French Polynesia, all these beautiful paradise screensaver islands, and the Cook Islands. And if we look from distant, and this Google Earth gives us very good view when we see the actual kind of topography of the bottom of the ocean, you can see where we have our trenches, the deep places where the two plates meet each other, and we see the the groups of the hills on the bottom, which are the underwater volcanoes. And it's the plates where the plume of the asthenosphere of the hot mantle come to the surface, and it's kind of warms up that area of the plate. And oceanic plate is not that thick, not as continental, but we know even through continents, those hotspots, with them called hotspots, volcanoes coming through. And here we have plenty of them around the Pacific, specifically in this area. And they all formed in lines. Even the Maldives we just watched before, they have the same line going through. So what's going on in terms of the Maldives? We know that Hindustan is crushed into the Asia and formed the Himalaya, the biggest mountain on the planet Earth today. And we talked about this in previous video about plate tectonics and about the mountains, about its formation. And when the Gondwana fall apart, and I talked about this in my previous video as well, we have this part of the continent which rapidly moved northward. And you can trace it from looking at the islands of Maldives, how it was moving. Because the hotspot, it's the part of the hot lava that sits here, that sits in one place. And when you move the plate through fast, the actual, in the mantle under the plate, the hot area stay there, but the plate moves. So therefore, warms up the area, for example, forming the volcano, and then it moves north, and it forms the new volcano, new area. In Hawaii, we talked about this in plate tectonic, very famous case when people actually study this a lot, and they dated all these islands, start from here, moving all the way till the southeast. And we know that the recent or active today volcanoes are located here, more older ones, the more you move to the east, remnants of the islands. And because it's in the middle of the ocean, and the land tend to dive back down, purely from geological aspects, erosion of the islands as well, and of course of these volcanoes, and of course from the sea level changes, we have those remnants of these islands in form of the mountains that sits under the water. But because they've been occupied by the animals, corals in particular, they stay in form of the corals as a rim on the surface. And why they're high enough, the corals can still build up into subsurface layer, because corals like to be quite high and in the warmer area of the waters, and we can have those atolls that are formed, sometimes with some piece of land, sometimes not. If you look on these islands, some of the corals are already forming all around, and with time, when this land will deteriorate and lower down, sea level change, the corals will build up this rim stronger, and we will have formation of the atoll here. And of course, with time, it will be destroyed as well. That's unfortunate future of all these type of islands. But the hotspot here, very obvious. Right now, it's around this main island. And people do an amazing job of dating all these older islands. We can see it on this picture, progressively moving from back down up here. But it's actually not the hotspot moving. It's the hotspot staying in the same place, but the plate is moving. And from there, geologists use this by dating all these little islands, calculating the rate of movement of the plate and direction. This is such a great marker for us. So let's look in the Pacific here. We have all these islands here too. You can even trace the lines of them. And the Cook Islands is one of them, and some call it the McDonald hotspot track. Usually call it as the volcanic hotspot highway. So all the Cook Islands, which the main 15 islands, are related to these extinct volcanoes in the South Central Pacific Ocean. The lower islands include 6 of the more northern islands, and they're all atolls, and the 4 southern uplifted coral islands. Rarotonga, which is the main island when you arrive to Cook Islands, and that's where the capital is located. And that's one the biggest here by the landmass actually, and it's volcanic island. And the rocks here include late Pleistocene, late Pliocene, and more recent volcanics, Oligocene and Miocene reefs, and tertiary limestone under these atolls. You can see the geography of that. There's an airport slit. You can arrive there. Avarua, it's the capital of the Cook Islands. Scientists suggested Rarotonga erupted between 1.6 to 1.1 million years ago, and it can be assigned to the McDonald hotspot, which went through this area 20 million years ago. Although with the Rarotonga hotspot it's not very defined where it's formed. The rocks that we can study above the sea, it's the basalts, olivine basalt, phonolite and trahite, eruptives, and found in lagoon inlet in Tapuaetai. And if we'll speak about Cook Islands, we have to mention the Aitutaki. So there's all these northern ones, and we have these odd ones, southern ones, islands. And let's look on Aitutaki. Aitutaki and the neighbor station, the Copra. These all islands, Cook Islands, are amazing. And Aitutaki, it's the one that's been visited by tourists. If you go to Cook Islands, you usually have a day trip where you can go there and stay in Aitutaki. And people are so attracted to that area because of its beauty. This is indeed the pearl of our planet. Although it depends what type of landscape you like. I'm as fan of the glaciers and colder landscapes as the mountains, as the ocean ones. But some people usually traditionally prefer more the tropical island type of landscape. But this landscape will leave breathless anyone who ever see it or visited it. Aitutaki is very unusual, so they call it submerged atoll. It's not like the classical atolls look like. We have the coral rim all around the French rim, or the atoll itself. So it's basically used to be the border of these corals that being like a ridge around the island, like for example Rarotonga you can see today. But then the middle part submerged or being destroyed. Both. Only this land, the big island, preserved. And it's actually quite significant big island. There's even some schools, villages, there's a big population and several villages. There's an airport where you can arrive. And there's also amazing resorts and beautiful 22 islands all around this rim. And many of them formed just on this top of the corals is the sediment in forms of corals accumulated, and that's what's responsible for these beautiful white sands. This part of the lagoon as well, so all of that. There's a two inlets, so it's here where there are boats coming through towards the island. And we also have the connection somewhere in the south. But in some places the ocean breaks through the coral rim. This island is also famous, this atoll, for the 1 foot island. It's that one. It does look like 1 foot island, actually like a foot of the person, but it's also called like that because it's basically you can come there and there's nothing there. And on that island it was the famous destination where people it's categorized as even separate like land on some point, and people could get stamps. And here there was a little reserve. People can come and stay. It was part of the TEAL Airline. There's an airline used to exist in 50s, which were taking people from coral atoll and beautiful islands to one to another, and they stop here. So today you can visit it as a tourist. It's an amazing place. And they can stamp your passport. And even if you are not a geologist, you can look at this island from the sky, from Google Earth, and see the way how it's formed. You can see the deepness and you can see the corals are there. So it's very famous for people who loves doing free diving or diving. It's an amazing place to be. Usually all these soils on these islands are very fertile because volcanic region, there's a lot of life, and because of that it makes it even more fertile. A lot of fishes, sea turtles coming here, and other life. It's most attractive, not just for people. And the diversity of the life on all these islands will depend on how far they are from the land. And there's some calculation being done by people, by scientists, how the further distance you travel through the ocean and how many migrating animals can reach. So usually in this type of islands we cannot see any mammals that haven't been introduced by people, but we usually we can maybe meet some bats, for example. Like in New Zealand originally there was only bats, there was the only mammals on that islands, but there's a diversity of birds, fishes, and other type of lizards. Today all these islands of course being occupied by pigs, rats, cats, and wild dogs, and other animals that have been introduced and brought by people. Things like rats and dogs being brought not recently but by original nations who discovered these lands back in the day and established a life there, and they brought it in the boats. So now you understand the uniqueness of these islands, and the main idea is that because of they located in such a warm waters, tropical waters, we usually find these coral atolls all around, mostly tropical and equatorial areas. If you looked on the French Polynesia or famous Bora Bora, that's breathtaking places. And of course you can visit it as a tourist. Depends which island you want to visit and how far it is. Well, depends how costly it is. Here you can see like remnants of these volcanoes, Hotspot highway travel through. The moment you learn about this and you see the maps, you could not unsee that, I can tell you. But sometimes in the areas like Samoa or somewhere else, we have complex situation when you have also you see the meeting point of two oceanic plates, like Tonga area as well. But the corals are forming here as well. So in my previous video about the coral reefs, how to save the coral reefs, we talk about corals themselves, so you can learn more how they formed and what temperature they live in, and why they're so sensitive to the climate change, in particular the warming of the waters. A lot of new research going on about what in particular they're sensitive to, and sometimes people not very understand. We still not 100% understand what's happening with the corals, but they're the most beautiful and yet sensitive animals that forming whole islands on our planet Earth today. Therefore, these islands, first of all, they're all subjected to big cyclones, typhoons, which are coming through regularly every year, and of course they're affecting maybe not so much islands themselves, although they can breach, the strong waves can breach some coral barriers and cause some flooding, but also they of course damaging people. Although Cook Islands, it's a separate independent country of South Pacific Ocean, but it's have association with New Zealand, so it's have close connection, law connection as well, and they call it the free association with New Zealand. It's a little bit hard to grasp. They don't have any armed forces on the island as well, so in case of any war or something like that, they will depend on the alliance with New Zealand. And most of Cook Islanders are also citizens of New Zealand, although the New Zealanders, they are not a citizen of Cook Islands. And although the Cook Island population is not that large, it's a very unique population with all history, language, and traditions. In the population, it's about 15,000 people. But you have to bear in mind how many Cook Islanders today live in New Zealand. And for example, in Aitutaki, historically, there was at some point try to grow bananas. So they're trying to grow them commercially or to supply to people. However, it didn't work out because too strong storms, seasonal cyclones, they're just destroying the plantation, and so people grow fruits and stuff, pawpaw, bananas, but it's mostly more like a small and private farms they have. Majority of the islands here, they're quite separated, northern islands. There's a group of islands here as well, including Palmerston. I remember talking to some people, and they spend a lot of money to travel there, because they have to go to Rarotonga, then Cook Island, and then get to those islands on some boats. And the families who live there, they're growing the pearls. They have the farms in the ocean, and the pearls are very famous from Cook Island, quite good quality, darker pearls. And the main money they can get, it's apart from the tourism, it's the pearl farming. Although for some reason some younger people, of course, tend to move to New Zealand or bigger land, such as in Australia, because of opportunities to travel. It's very far. If you think about New Zealand, how far to get till New Zealand, think about even further and more expensive to get till the Cook Islands. However, recently there have been airlines that are traveling from the United States directly to Cook Islands. We'll see what it's going to bring to this unique area, positive or negative effect. So here we are, we travel through these little beautiful islands, and we mostly talk about its formation in geology. And there's not much research or papers you can read about these areas, unfortunately. So I tried to very briefly describe formation of this type of islands, and some islands more studied. For example, same like Rarotonga, we don't have that much information yet, like for Hawaii. So in the future videos we'll talk about some other places, and it might give more insight on the Cook Islands themselves. I hope you enjoyed it, and I wish you some amazing vacation, some time in your life in some very tropical island in Pacific. Meanwhile, subscribe, share this video, and I will see you next time. All the best.